Oh,
You want me to point here?
okay. So just to kind of start off, we wanted to give just an overview of like what are the roles or like what things kind of fall under the umbrella of mentoring an undergrad in particularly. And so throughout like talking and just coming through various resources, you know, there's these themes of like giving advice and encouragement, of course, providing research kind of resources and sharing skills with them, as well as providing kind of a framework for them, helping them to kind of develop independence if that's relevant to their timeline, and also kind of enrichment, like helping them find more opportunities and like professional development type circumstances to be a part of. And as many of you know, kind of just start, you know, as an undergrad, you're really starting to build what will eventually be your scientific network, so helping them to build that network is also a really important role. And so many of us, I think, can fall into mentorship because we're told we're about to be a mentor, but it is something that I think everyone gets the sense that is an experience that's valued, especially as you continue in particular paths. So you can really value mentorship for, you know, what you can learn and the, you know, things that you can develop the ability to do as you go. So just to kind of break down some of the smaller goals of this workshop, we've kind of just talked about like broad characteristics of like what a good mentor should aim to do. And we'll first talk about practices for recruiting undergraduate researchers that may or may not be as relevant depending on where you're at in your mentorship role, but also we'll talk a little bit about kind of cross-cultural considerations. So that's something that we kind of feel might not be touched on enough. So there's also going to be some talk about managing and management styles and expectation setting you'll see as a recurring theme. And then Jake will lead you guys through kind of thinking about and developing maybe like a mock project if you don't already have one in mind for an undergraduate researcher. This is part one.
So I'll take over and talk about motivation and recruiting. So starting out with ask around the room, why do you want an undergrad? Do you have any, if you are the one who's in charge of getting an undergrad and you just not just throwing one, why do you want someone to mentor?
Well, I kind of already was like assigned one. She worked in our lab previously over the summer, and then she's only a freshman, so my mentor kind of wants me to like take her and show her the ropes. We have a microscopy sort of process that takes like a couple of weeks to get through, and there's different steps of it. So he wants me to like train her in these different steps so that eventually she can take over for me, and to basically like develop these images that we're doing. So I want an undergraduate researcher, her, to kind of take over like the hands-on lab work.
That's great. Any other advice that people like?
Yeah, I like mentoring. I like getting to know the undergrads, and also I want good people to go into our field.
Yeah, so it's more of like an outreach-focused idea that you want to help them learn, not only just to get things done, but to also enhance their experience in school.
I also want to help her learn.
Obviously, it's always like a data thing.
Just because we're handed an undergrad doesn't mean we don't care about the outcome of the undergrad.
Yeah. So I thought about different reasons why I would want an undergrad. One of them is similar to yours. We need just help to do, like, I have a lot of self-coaching work, so if someone would do that instead of me, that's like hours a week that I'd have free time, and they'd learn a lot about the sample or how to get everything to work. So that would be like a general student, like a first year, second year, that doesn't really need to know a lot to do the job, but they'll learn and they'll grow with you. Other ideas are like if you need a lot of analysis done, you might want to get an honor student or someone who already knows how to code so that you don't have to teach them everything for 2 months and they're gone within a year, because undergrads don't really stay around for a really long time. Another reason is outreach, which is similar to your idea that you just want to help a student learn. And there's a lot of things through the university that you can do that without having an undergrad for 3 or 4 years. You can get a high school intern for the year or the semester where you just teach them things so they get a lot out of it, but you don't have to devote 3 years to it and a lot of time to an undergrad that may leave soon and you don't know their scheduling. And then the last thing is more mentorship focused, so not just outreach to people, but to really have a first year student, work with them for 3 years, get them to know everything you know, and just have a fully formed scientist at the end. So your motivation for why you want a student is really important for recruitment, to find the different ways to advertise to students, because you don't want a first year if you actually want someone who knows R and knows MATLAB. That's just not going to happen. It's going to take like a year for them to get up to that point, and you might be gone by then. So resources for this. I don't know how many of you know, but we actually have at Maryland a Center for Undergrad Research. And there's a ton of resources. The ones for faculty are not that great. It's like how to find one, and it's all right and what to do. Yeah. But they do have a very important part of that website that I have the link to right here, but you can try and search for an undergrad, create like an advertisement for them, and get the type of student you want. So you can say what department, what skills they need before they get into your lab, what the project will be like. So you don't just have an email out to like all of physics and be like, does anyone want to do a project? You get the students and they don't really want to do your project. So this is a way to find students. You can talk to your advisor, see if they want to use this service, so you can share their information along with yours in this type of setup.
Undergrads really do check it. We've gotten several in our lab from it.
I've never used it before, so I don't know. And then there's also, I'm not sure how to click this link while it's on them. A combined resource now. Maybe this is it. There we go. That we are starting through the program that put on this workshop to try and get, similar to the undergrad research website, just a place where our faculty and fellows and then new students can try and get together and work on projects together. So this is new as of like this week. This
page is just up, and if you go to the website, you should be able to find it. Chelsea is the fellow who's the director of undergraduate research, and so the idea is that there's a place for like faculty or grad students to like kind of put out, like to fill out a survey and say I'm interested in having a student, and then there's also a place for undergrads to go, with the idea kind of being that COMBINE is a very interdisciplinary program. So like for example, I'm a neuroscientist, but not the type where I have very, very advanced computational skills. So if I theoretically have an idea of what I need to do computationally, it might be nice to have an undergrad in CS or somewhere that I can say, hey, like, can you help me code this up? Or vice versa or anything like that. So it's new, and we've already gotten some shows of support from different programs and departments, so we're hoping it will grow.
So that's our main points. How do I get this to go?
View and print it.
Okay. So, as I mentioned before, you can fill this out yourself and with your advisor to get a student. If you already have a student, this is obviously not as important, but you'll probably go through multiple undergrads throughout your time here because they're only here for 4 years. They'll probably be in your lab for 1 or 2, and you're here for like 5 to 7 or 8.
Don't say the higher numbers.
So in addition to those resources, there's a lot of REUs at UMD that you can get students from. So for IRIG, which is applied physics, you can get a trend student for the summer. They're paid, so they're more likely to be very motivated, and it's a lot harder to get those types of positions, so you can have a fully formed project for 10 weeks that you don't want to have to do and have a student work on it. There's also UMD STAR and UM ADAPT, which are, I forget which department that is.
Those are in the School of Public Health, probably. Yeah.
So not as relevant, but also you can become more interdisciplinary as you go along. There's also things at places around DC, so the NIH has a lot of programs, so if you're more biology focused, you can look into that for a student that really wants a different experience. Maybe just for a semester, they learn a lot, bring it back to your lab and help out everybody. There's also Grad Map, which is through physics and astronomy, where you can help underrepresented students figure out if they want to go to college and what they want to do with their life, career-wise. And then of course the combined undergrad research network that is coming into flourishing now. And you can always ask your advisor, because they have a lot more resources than you. They get emails from undergrads who like their research and things like that. So, now that I went through it all, I'm just going to see what the process looks like. Obviously, the first step is to identify your motivation, know why you want an undergrad, and what type of undergrad you want, and cater everything from that point from that. Second step is to shape your expectations. So you need to know what skills you want them to have before you invest in them. Also, how much time you have to devote to a student. If you're creating your thesis and you just have a small project but you're almost done, it's a little bit harder to have an undergrad working while you're writing up a ton of papers and things like that. Third step is to find that student. So work with your mentor, work with all the different ways you can find an undergrad, all the different websites that we just went through.
We should note also that for many of you, like the process might just start here.
Yeah.
Depending how your lab works. But I would encourage you, if you have the type of relationship with your mentor where you could approach them about going through the first part of the process and really seeking out an undergrad. Like if you need a crew for your dissertation project or something like that, it can be really a beneficial experience to find someone that really matches your needs. Sometimes you can find that in your advisor's pile of emails of people that are interested, and sometimes you can't. So.
Mm-hmm. And once you find someone, you have to make sure they're a fit. So are they responsive to emails? Are they just coming in for one meeting and then you never hear from them again? Availability, because they have a lot of classes, they might only be available in the morning. You might not come in until noon and work until 8. Like it's not going to work out if that's the situation. And then make sure that they're actually invested in the research you're doing. See if they're interested in papers that you've published or your lab has published, and making sure that they're a good fit for you along with the outer lab environment.
If I can note, there's some asterisk after this idea of like your first impression of them. And so just to kind of pull your attention to generally, and this is true of like admissions processes also, there tends to be a tendency to kind of favor more kind of extroverted personalities as like someone that like feels personable. And so just like to be aware of that, and that also comes into some kind of cross-cultural type of things that Tracy will talk about, which is that just depending on different cultural norms, being more like assertive or, you know, I mean, I'm a loud, obnoxious person, so maybe that helps in some contexts, maybe it doesn't. But just not to put too much weight on like, do I think this person could be my friend? Because you might kind of miss a great opportunity to work with someone if you put a little too much weight on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the last point is to make sure that you set your expectations at the beginning of the internship or the mentorship, or as early as you can. Do it today if you have an undergrad that you haven't talked about, the expectations that we'll go through in a little bit. And it's also important to remember that sometimes it just doesn't work out, and try and make the best of that situation. So.
Okay, so I'm Tracy, and I'm an international student. So I'm here to talk about cross-cultural mentoring. First, let's see some statistics. This is a bar plot of the number of all the students on campus, and the black one are non-immigrant total, which means international students. So here you can see we have like more than 6,000 international students on campus. And especially when you are in science and engineering fields, you will find many international students. And so more than 3,000 of them are graduate students, and more than 1,000 are undergrads. So it's very likely that in mentoring an undergrad, you may meet someone from a different cultural context. So who are they? Let's look at these plots which identifies the region of citizenship. And you will find that about 80% of them come from Asian countries or Asian countries. So what's the difference between Asian countries and here? Well, there is a definition called high context and low context cultures. So from those national flags, you can see that some European countries and also the United States are of low context. However, for many Asian countries, they are high context. Here I made a table of the major difference between no context and high context countries. They have many differences, especially in communication. So in high context countries, which like China, when I was in China, people don't speak just by their own. They have to speak in an order, and everyone just speak very harmoniously. And when they want to criticize something, they must put it in a very indirect way. However, here when we discuss some problems, I think you will just put it straightforward. I remember there is an Asian politician. Her name is Elaine Chao, and now she's a cabinet member. She said that when she first came to the United States, she was always waiting to be asked to speak. However, after many times, she finally realized that no one will ask you to speak. You have to speak on your own. And also, when people face disagreements, it's very easy to be personalized for high context culture people. For example, if you are in mathematics, there is a mathematician called Tom Zhang. He comes from China, and his PhD advisor also comes from an Asian country. During his PhD study, he proved some theories that proved by his PhD advisor was wrong, and this offended his PhD advisor. So he graduated, but he didn't get any recommendation letters. So as a math PhD, he didn't find a job in academia, and ended up working in Subways, help selling sandwiches. And after a few years, he finally got a lecturer position. And after many, many years, until he solved a very important problem in prime numbers, he was invited to be a professor at Princeton, and now he moved to Santa Barbara. So actually, he could become a very successful mathematician. But because of this disagreement in high context cultures, his PhD advisor think, oh, perhaps you're targeting me, so it's offended. And also in physics space and privacy, I think it's very normal for like a male supervisor to contact another male mentee in China, or a female contact another female, just pat or hand in hand, or perhaps, yeah. But here it seems that people very value their personal space, so there must be some physical boundary between two people. Here I'm going to give some concrete examples about how this difference might influence the daily communication between you and your cultural difference, mentors or mentees. Okay, so if both mentors and mentees are in a high context culture, there should be not many problems. However, if a high context mentor, pretty much like me, international students, if I guide a no context mentee, like a domestic students, sometimes I may find that he or she it just talks too much and just interrupts you when they have any questions. Because in our country, during a seminar, if you have any questions, you have to wait patiently at the end of the seminar, and you raise up your hands and say, hey, professor or a doctor, blah, blah, I have a question on page blah, blah. And here, you just interrupt it. So I'm already get accustomed to this interruption, but perhaps for some inexperienced mentors, they may still need some time. And also for low context mentor, which like domestic students, if you meet some international students as your mentee, perhaps you may find him or she is a little shy and didn't talk much. You can encourage him or her to talk. And I'm sure if as an undergraduate researcher, they must have some ideas. So they must have something to say, but perhaps they're not brave enough. And about disagreement. So if there is any disagreement, perhaps a mentor from high context culture, they may think that the authority is challenged. Especially when I was in my undergrad, I remember when we did some experiment, it's a web experiment, and we have some disagreement about the procedures. and one a very, very senior PhD student, his idea is different from us, and he feels very unhappy when we didn't adopt his idea. And here, I think, yeah, people are more comfortable with experiments, so that's nice. Okay, so about privacy, just as Abby and Lauren said before, we have some boundaries, like professional boundary between the personal life and the professional life. Sometimes the first impression perhaps is not very good, but if you don't care about this personal part, what kind of clothes she or he wears, or what kind of food they eat, I think it's pretty nice to have mentors or mentees of different cultures. Okay, so here I have some practical guide. The first one is to adopt a non-judgmental attitude. We need to accept the difference. For example, in China, every PhD student is very young. I say they're young because they don't work after graduation, after they graduate from undergrad. So most of them are like 22 to 28. However, here I find people are more flexible. Many PhD students, perhaps they work for a few years after graduation. So when we meet a very old PhD student in China, many people will find, oh, why are you so old to do a PhD study? Yeah, but here I think we need to accept the difference, that people have different life paths, and we need to respect their choice. And also boundaries in different culture, yeah, the professional and personal life. So just take my country as an example. Yeah, in China, it's a little acceptable that if a professor and a student, they have some romantic relationship, or a senior PhD student has some affairs with the mentees he or she supervised. Yeah, that's acceptable. But I think here it might violate some academic conduct code, especially for faculty members and students, and also teaching assistants and students. Yeah. So please study the academic conduct code before you plan to develop some personal relationship with your mentees. And also, please be explicit about expectations. So like China and Japan, I had a Japan college. I had a colleague last semester, and he was very shy and is not explicit about expectations, but he wants to learn in our group. So yeah, we just encourage him to talk more, and we also give very detailed feedback. And gradually, he becomes more candid about his expectation for our group. So he was working in a pharmaceutical company, and he wanted to learn some NMR technologies, which is nice. So I think as long as we are very explicit about expectations, we can make more progress. Okay, yeah. That's my share about cultural mentoring. Next.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. We're moving past like recruitment and finding your undergrad. I think a lot of us have been in the situation where we're like, okay, now I have this undergraduate researcher. Like, what's next? And so, I think it's very intuitive that there's boundary setting, like we've talked about, and not just being like, stay away from me, but just being clear about what the boundaries are. Constant communication, when it works, is always a good idea. And also like providing like a rewarding environment, not just like holistically, but actually rewarding undergraduates, even in the small ways for like the hard work they do. And so we kind of want to start this section by thinking about some hypothetical situations that could happen, and we got these from this lovely practical tips resource that is kind of nice. So I'll kind of like, I guess we kind of conceptualize this as like a think, pair, share, but it's a small enough group that maybe we can just talk out loud. So in thinking about like the scenario that's kind of named like the confused nod. So say like you have a student and you discuss a project with them and like review background and kind of get them to a place that they should be ready to go and they seem really enthusiastic. And then you meet again and they haven't made any progress on whatever it is they're doing, and they don't really know where to start. And you begin again, and then the kind of same things happens where your next meeting comes up and they still feel stuck. So what do? There's no right answer. Or there are several right answers.
After you explain this project, could you ask them to like say it back to you, sort of in their own words?
Yeah, so kind of like a Bloom's taxonomy, like can you explain back to me like what you should be doing?
Yeah.
Nice.
I would like to go to a more detailed step-by-step explanation of what is there to do, maybe, and see.
Yeah, like breaking it down a little bit more, so
Yeah,
it feels
seeing where they got started, probably.
yeah, maybe it'll feel a little bit less unwieldy if that's the case. Other ideas?
Yeah, like a similar example that you can walk through with them.
Yeah.
Or like or start the project kind of for them and not do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure, and a lot of it is like dependent on what the task or project is, right? Other ideas?
Similar to like breaking down the problem, maybe making it more well-defined or concrete, because research problems can be a bit vague sometimes, but you don't know which direction to take. So you could say, okay, just focus on this question right now and see what you can do with it.
Yeah, right, so like a lot of times it comes down to remembering where in the research process they are too. So when your advisor says, do this lit review, maybe they need to provide a little bit fewer footholds on the way. Take the other.
Maybe like reminding the student to come to you before they, waste a week without doing anything. So it's a good way.
Yeah, like encouraging, like, you can shoot me an email if you get stuck, that's what I'm here for. I'm not gonna answer at 3 a.m. on, whatever. Okay, so here's another situation. So you think you've been ghosted by a good student, whatever that means to you, like maybe they they just stopped showing up or you didn't see them for more than half an hour over a few weeks. In this case, they had some promising results, so maybe you're confused about why they would do that.
Maybe you need to reiterate your expectations that they show up regularly.
Yeah.
Maybe they were just unaware of those expectations.
Yeah. Hopefully you're reiterating them and not iterating them for the first time. Any other?
Email them.
Email's a good start.
It would be a good idea to ask them if there's a specific reason without being too intrusive. And
Yeah.
they'd go from there. Because there might be a real reason, and you would be an insensitive person to ask them to leave it there. No,
Sure. Oh, I like that. So it's like, let's like kind of put on our nurturing kind of face.
Maybe a little bit, not
and
much,
like,
but
well, not like you have to like coddle them, but yeah, I guess like we've discussed a lot that like these type of mentoring experiences can really turn people on and off to like continuing in science. So if their first experience of feeling like we don't know what they're feeling and we don't know why they're not there, if their first experience is like, why weren't you here? That could be like a little bit traumatizing in terms of how you kind of conceptualize what this might be like. All right, so we have another one. The shadow. We didn't name these, right? These were just like, did you name these?
I said my name.
Oh yeah, Abby named these. So you have an eager student, they come to your office and ask questions, and like you don't really want to you don't want to push them off. Like it's nice when an undergrad asks questions, but like you do like have work to do. You really need to focus on your work, so you can't talk to them every 5 minutes when they come by your office. So what are we gonna do? Maybe some
Get a new office.
like barricaded doors. Ghost them, be like put a post-it that's like I'm not here. Hopefully like something that comes to mind is just communicating with them about what, you talked about boundaries, so maybe the boundaries need to be reiterated or iterated. Just kind of okay, so this is, I've experienced this one, so it hurts a little bit. So this is like the know-it-all. So there's a student who treats their peers like other undergrads in the lab, just kind of like they're inferior. So maybe they've been in the lab longer, or they're older, or whatever reason it is. They think they don't really need to listen to other undergrads, and they just kind of act like they're kind of above undergrads. So how do we handle this situation?
So clarification, are we talking about undergrads working in the same lab? Is this a workplace situation, or is it just that they're an arrogant person?
Oh yeah, I guess they could bleed in. So in this context, I would say that our responsibility as mentors really ends at the, there's not much I can do if someone's arrogant outside of my
Right.
lab, besides maybe giving them a nudge that, so in this case, let's say either other undergrads in your lab or within relevant working groups there seems to be like a repeated kind of feeling that they act very superior and whatever.
Well, what kind of actions are these?
A fair question. This was a very general kind of prompt that this thing gave us. So there's going to be a difference between how we handle like just talking over other undergraduates versus if they're actually like denigrating other undergraduates' ideas, right?
There's a big part of the piece was saying if you have multiple undergrads and one of them is maybe not as good as the other ones, to still encourage them and give them a ton of rewards when the know-it-all undergrad is there. It's for them to realize that even though they're better than the other ones, everyone's still equal, everyone still did a good job from where they're at in their research. So just to make sure they know that you don't think they're better just because they may know how to analyze data better, or already have a lot of experiences, that kind of thing.
I think the know-it-all still needs rewards too, though, like,
Yeah.
not more than anybody else, because to me, this type of attitude represents somebody who might be insecure about their own performances, so I think continuing to give them positive and negative feedback is probably, like, helpful, so they don't need to feel like they are, what does it say? They don't need to feel like they are above anybody else.
Or that they need to put on this kind of
Yeah.
air of being, and a great point. And like a lot of times it's just modeling, like that's a great point, Jake, but I just want to listen to what, X or Y had to say before we continue, right? It can be something as simple as setting that. Did you see?
Yeah, well, if there's a persistent problem, it probably falls under the issue of how to give feedback to somebody without insulting them, but making it effective. So I think that even a short private session with them could prove out beneficial, in which we wouldn't have an attacking or blaming behavior, but maybe stressing out that we're all a team. And if the team has some kind of suboptimal behaviors, then this is going to affect everybody, including me and them. So,
Yeah, so definitely making it a private kind of, if it comes to the point that you need to actually have a conversation, it shouldn't happen in front of the other undergrads, but sometimes, because I mean, those of us who have mentored undergrads, is some people just have an easier time getting to the point of kind of working independently and seeing what needs to happen next, right? So maybe it's just an issue of, hey, let's just give this person a little time so they can figure out what happens next or something. Jake, did you have?
Yeah, I mean, this could also be something of maybe creating a competitive environment, and it could maybe take a step back and look at is it a collaborative or competitive environment that you're creating amongst your undergrads in lab?
Yeah, and a lot of that can be, it's like when you kind of take a step back, it can be as simple as rather than saying you three are working on the same project, go along and work on it and come back next week, where maybe a dominating personality could really, not knowing they're doing so, really kind of overwhelm the efforts of the team. Delegating a little bit more clearly, different parts of the task can also be something else. Anyway, there's lots of different correct answers, so I'm glad that we're... So something that, hopefully it's become aware that we're big fans of setting expectations, because a lot of these issues are infinitely more difficult, if not impossible, to really appropriately deal with if expectations really haven't been set clearly from the get-go. And not only set from the beginning, right, so you're really setting expectations when you decide what you want or need from an undergraduate. But starting, even revisiting at that first meeting when you actually have your undergraduate, and continuing to revisit as issues come up or as needs change is a really important piece. So many of you may know that the graduate school now requires with little enforcement a statement of mutual expectations between graduate students and their advisors. So I know my program has pushed us all to do it. I don't know about other programs. But what that is a form, and this is publicly available on the grad school website.
And we have handouts.
We have it. And so this form is meant to, like at the beginning of a mentorship, but with kind of repeated revisiting, hold a mentee and their mentor accountable for what is expected of each person. And so it seems like a simple idea, but I think it's a simple idea when things don't go wrong. And if things are going wrong, you wish you would have done something like this. So we've created like a modified version that might be more applicable to a graduate student and their undergraduate mentor. So we actually have like a little activity. So like, I'm psyched. It sounded like it was like a really good conversation.
Yeah.
Who wants to like kick off and like tell us like what kind of came up? Or
So I'll start with an easy one. I got scheduling. So this is all pretty logistical, but I think it is a really important thing to discuss because I know from my standpoint with my mentor, I needed to explicitly say like, how do you want me to let you know if I'm going to be gone for a week? Like that was important for me to know from him what his expectations were. So that's important for me to know from my mentee also.
yeah,
Like, do you need time off around finals? Are you gonna show up on time? Or are you that type of person who's like 10 minutes late here or there, but will stay late, that kind of thing? So yeah, how to notify each other, like when we're not gonna be there or something like that. That's important for scheduling. And then my little group didn't get to talk about the other thing, which was procedures and practices. But for this, just maintaining a clean and safe lab space, notifying us if supplies are low, and notifying the lab if something is broken.
yeah. And all of those are like really seem like little things until you realize they're not actually, they can't really be assumed that they would look at a box, our last box of gloves per se, and be like, I should tell someone ordering it that we need more, right? Some of us believe they should be assumed, but maybe we're grad students and not undergrads. Yeah, awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we focused on mentor responsibilities. So what came out would be, first of all, the super level responsibility would be to be clear about expectations and things. Now, as far as more concrete suggestions go, the mentor would have to have a time commitment. They shouldn't expect to get away with not dealing at all with their mentee and hoping that the mentee is going to be self-guided. So time commitment, I think, is a big thing. Caring about the academic development of the mentee, which could be fostering independence in terms of research, encouraging them to participate in conferences or research fairs or anything related to research outreach. Also relaying career advice for them so that they know what they might have to do to follow an academic path. So yeah, care about their career development, their academic development. And also treat mentoring as a teaching and pedagogic task, therefore. Meaning that virtues such as patience are going to be greatly appreciated and greatly effective. Or teaching methods like using questions and not just delivering monotonous speeches. So it's a teaching task, and therefore be pedagogic. And also, people brought up that mentors should care about the work-life balance of their mentees, and realize that only if this balance is good, and if it exists, only then will they be able to do their research in an enjoyable manner for them. We didn't really have time to discuss about the responsibilities of the mentee, so I would
The flip side. The flip side of that.
The flip side, yeah. Well, my personal opinion is that the first and foremost there would be the time commitment that they would be expected to have, and this would likely be even greater than the credit hours they are supposed to spend at the lab, unfortunately, since often this is a minimum time requirement that's not going to let them benefit a lot from the research they do. But this would be up for negotiating. Also, I would in terms of my mentees, if I was a mentor, I would encourage them to have a good research and lab culture in terms of being good communicators, respectful to other members of the team, and cooperative, and etc. Also, seek for help if they're seriously stuck somewhere. I think that's very important so they don't lose a week over something that would have been answered in any minute. So if you're seriously stuck, don't do that. And I would, if a bit informally, but I would also ask them to take advice and guidance seriously. Because sometimes I may think that your wise words, the mentor's wise words, are mostly optional guidelines, but they're there to help them. So it's they usually go for the fastest way to progress. So.
Yeah. And I would also I think it, hopefully I would encourage everyone to, and hopefully it's kind of clear how a lot of the bigger ideas about what we want to do, encourage them to have good communication. There also are actionable items that come from that. So making it clear to them, I put in writing for my undergrads, for example. If I send you an email during the week, I expect a response in most cases within 1 working day. Because you should be on email. I don't know how undergrads just aren't on email. But over the weekend, for example, if you need me over the weekend, don't expect a response right away, unless I've explicitly told you I'll make myself available when you have a deadline on Monday or something. And so hopefully you can see how bigger expectations can get broken down into smaller, more, I think the kind of bottom tends to be more logistical kind of expectations as well. But that's nice because it holds you accountable for those logistical expectations as well. So we have a good handful more minutes to discuss.
I have professional and individual development, and so some of the things I was suggesting was explicitly tell them conferences that they can attend. Also, if you have any collaborators, you should invite them to go to the meetings with them. Because I know sometimes people do work with someone that's working with a collaborator, but their only contact is through the graduate student. Whereas if you bring them undergrad with you when you talk to them, that can benefit. It's like networking opportunities, I guess. Yeah. Also, I would advise them to prepare and present work even if they have no results, just so they're used to gathering their stuff together. And that's they can put a presentation together on what they're learning, I guess, or something like that. And then this one was pretty much all covered by him.
You did a great job, right? Awesome, thanks. What about which one is
So I also have responsibilities of undergraduate mentoring. So I guess a lot of things which he covered, but maybe a few more pointers which are similar. So at the start, they should be, I guess, clear on what the goal of the project will be and what sort of background knowledge they have, so they should communicate that with the advisor. And also, I think very important, they should be willing to work on it and make progress on it. It's not something that, you see, that's beginning of the semester, and at the end, hi there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one more, I guess, thing would be to communicate with the mentor frequently or according to expectations, but also be mindful of their schedule. So don't ghost, but at the same time, just realize that they also have huge time commitments. So just don't keep spending them.
Yeah. Because if we all had 40 extra hours, we'd spend it all mentoring, right? Yeah. So we just don't. I'm so sorry, I forget your name in the back. I'm so sorry, I forget your name. So that's okay. And so hopefully, so in the resources that you have access to after this, and also handouts if you want to take them in paper with you, is the actual kind of modified form that we have. So whether or not when you get a new undergrad you choose to formally go through the form, we encourage it because really getting expectations clearly communicated from the get-go is so vital to a good working relationship and really makes adapting them easier. And then to some of the points that I think you just mentioned about background information and stuff, Jake is going to talk about getting your project going, and so that's a nice segue into his creating a project.
I know.
I keep going backwards. There's nothing upside down probably.
And if you haven't filled out the graduate version of this form with your advisor, we have also copies of those that you can show up to your advisor with and be like, this is what you're supposed to be doing with the yearly or semester.
Cool. Alright, so I'm going to talk quickly about the things that go into creating a project that will be successful for an undergraduate. Relatively quickly. In general, there's kind of 4 types of students and there's 4 types of projects. You're going to have a student-driven independent project, which is something similar to an honors thesis, or a senior undergraduate. Those are pretty independent. They're essentially proto-graduate students, right? So you'll be in more of an advisor role. The second kind of idea is you might have students working on spin-offs or small sub-questions of your own project. This is kind of my favorite. It allows me to I have 4 undergraduates working for me on various kind of like little ideas that I have that may or may not work out, that I can't spend time on, but I can advise them closely on. Another great way to have students start working in lab is to just, especially if you're doing like wet lab work, is to have them essentially be an extra pair of hands. Although, while this is a good way to start, you want to give them room to grow. And finally, you might have students kind of just doing grunt work, and there's lots of labs that just need grunts, essentially. And if you're not paying students, really, you should be giving them room to grow. So grunt work is a great way to start a student off in lab and say, you know, are you responsible enough to even show up? It's not a great thing if someone's working in your lab for 4 years for free, just like categorizing images. That's not fair to you and it's not fair to the student, especially if they're signed up for course credit. So make sure that they have room to grow and that there maybe is a possibility for side projects. Oftentimes people will kind of take this like caterpillar into butterfly approach where you start out as a student doing kind of simple tasks, they'll grow into semi-independent projects, and eventually they'll do some sort of honors thesis with you. That sort of process takes years, right? You're going to get a student in their sophomore or freshman year, and you want to kind of talk to these students at the outset, be like, how many years do you plan on spending in lab? Which they may not know, right? You can't hold them responsible if they, as a sophomore, decide they want to change. But that's not the only path. A lot of times students will come in later, right? And sometimes it's nice to take students who are farther along because they'll have a lot more biology or physics or math background, so you can put them onto big projects immediately. So what makes a good project? And we did a survey of people on Twitter, faculty on campus, and the points that kind of came out again and again were that really you need to have part of the project that you know is 100% doable. That you can say, here are 10 steps that you need to take immediately that I know what they are, that like this is achievable, it's easy, I've planned this out completely for you. You eventually want that to grow into a place where they can do the rest for themselves, but really you want a very clear plan for the beginning of the project, which is not always how I set my own projects up, right? I'm more comfortable exploring, but I can't expect a student to be able to do that. At the same time, it should be real. It's something that should be able to be turned into a conference presentation or even part of a paper. It should be real new science, right? You're not just having them like do busy work for the sake of doing busy work. You're not just having them repeat some like known experiment unless you want to test something about reproducibility. But you should really be having them contribute to science in a way and be able to think and plan based on the results. It's different from just like teaching a course. And then obviously you want it to be tailored to the student, but we can kind of talk about that quite a bit. So kind of on this note, what I like to do is actually put together a proposal when I have a new student come into lab. And so I do this with all of the students who I've worked with, at this point 6. And I make either in an email or in a LaTeX document that has a little bit of background on the lab, and information about what the whole lab does, information about what I do, useful resources in terms of papers and tutorials. They have background information they can always reference back to as needed, as well as several core papers that I expect them to have read to be able to work in lab. Also, this could be kind of stapled to your list of expectations, and together this is going to be like your syllabus, right? This is the master document. They should have to read it, and you should make sure they've read it by asking them questions about it. I also update and reassess these periodically. And so I've given you kind of a draft proposal with like what you would put theoretically in each place. feel free to modify that at will, but you may find that useful. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the planning that goes into what you think about before you write that proposal. So one is, what do you need to know? What are the skills in terms of lab skills, data analysis, basic biological knowledge that a student will need to know to be successful in lab, just to do the project. Be explicit about these skills and write them down. And then before the student comes, search out relevant tutorials, chapters of your lab manual, chapters of textbooks that they should be able to go to and read. Because for me, if I need to learn something new, I'm a graduate student, I learned how to learn by myself. Undergraduate students have not been able to do that, especially if they're freshmen or sophomores. They don't have enough background, in my case in biology, but in whatever field, to actually effectively do a Google search a lot of the time, right? They might look for a tutorial to accomplish what they want, but they won't know what the search terms are. And so helping them by just providing them with those tutorials, because it's going to be a lot easier for you to search, is often actually a huge time saver. And this is something I didn't realize at first, that like I had to sometimes be a little bit more explicit than I thought I would have to be about what resources were good, because they're also not good at picking out good tutorials or like good resources, right? And so put some thought into that as well. Then there's the things that you think they should know, right? Like, and I like to pick 2 to 3 review papers and 2 to 3 kind of experimental or computational papers that form a core of knowledge that will help them kind of succeed in the lab. So like a broad annual review, a more specific review. Research articles, I tend to pick one experimental or one computational. So they've kind of got a range of views on a particular subject, right? I prioritize readability over thoroughness, right? It might not be the paper that I got the most out of, but it's the paper that I found easiest to read. And then someone said this, you said this earlier, or one of you guys said it, where you have them kind of explain back to you points. Like I'll give them a set of papers, I'll say, read these, I'll come back and say, do you have any questions? And they'll invariably say, yes, I understood the whole paper. They'll be like, great, explain me the major points of that paper, and explain me where these fit in, and then I'll ask them questions about it. And this isn't to like quiz them to like make sure they're a good student, it's because they don't realize they haven't understood things, or what they haven't understood, until they explain it to you, and then you're like, and then sometimes you realize that they think they understood it, but their perception of what actually happened can be surprisingly skewed. So that extra step of making sure is important. Kind of all together, what you should be doing is really thinking about learning goals. And I don't know if any of you have taken science teaching classes or things like that, but setting clear learning goals before you build a lesson plan is something that the Teaching and Learning Center talks about quite a bit. You should treat this in a similar way, where you make a list of the things that you want your undergraduate to know, and then you explicitly discuss those goals with your undergraduate, and you design tasks around those goals. Rather than designing tasks and then thinking about what they should get out of those tasks, the process should be kind of concept first. And so you can think of some high-level goals, like being able to read the literature, but I think kind of more specific specialized goals are oftentimes where we focus a lot of time on, so domain-specific knowledge. In this case, also you can think about motivational goals. So for a lot of students, just like a sense of belonging in lab, or like being comfortable and feeling like they belong, like they can do this, is a big part of what lab work is about. Because I remember like the first time being in lab was terrifying. Trying to find enough that I became a computational biologist instead of a lab biologist. Alright, and so kind of on this point, I've set up an activity where you all should have come with kind of a vague idea of like a research topic, but if you don't have a research topic, think about some learning goals that you would want a student to have. And there's room for 3 learning goals in that worksheet, but just fill out 2. To try to identify a broad goal and a specific goal that you'd like students to have. And if you have extra time, you can do a motivational goal too, and then a specific task that you would want them to do to these. And then when you're done, you can turn